Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this Friday on the last day of Ignite. I hope everyone's had a great time. My name is Bridget Murtaugh, and I'm a product manager on the VS Code team at Microsoft.
Yep, and I'm Damien Brady. I am a developer advocate over at the GitHub side.
Today, we're super excited to show you what you can do with GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio Code. To set some context for what our agenda looks like for the next 45 minutes, we're going to spend about 1 minute on slides, and then everything else is going to be live demos. So we hope you're excited to see some demos, see some things in action, and we're really going to be showing you Copilot live right now as we work on it. So as a quick overview, I'd love to get a raise of hands. Who has tried out GitHub Copilot? All right, most folks in the room, that is awesome. No worries if you've tried it, haven't tried it. I think this session hopefully will be interesting or helpful to most folks. In case you haven't heard of it or hadn't had a chance to try it yet, GitHub Copilot is an AI pair programmer tool that's gonna help you write code faster and smarter. You can use it in Visual Studio Code via the Copilot extension, which we show there on the right in the slide. All right, as promised, 1 minute on slides, and now let's go ahead and hop into the actual demos.
I'll also say as well, for all of the people standing at the back, there's going to be a lot of stuff running. This is a 45-minute session. I would highly guarantee grabbing a seat. There's some up the front here. There's like 5 up the front. By the way, if you have a seat next to you, it's a good idea if you can like shift left, and then we have opened up some spaces. But yeah, please sit down. Otherwise, you won't be able to lean forward on your seat when you're incredibly excited when you see something.
Good point. We hope you're all going to be very excited throughout this whole session. Edge of your seats. Okay, setting some context here for our demos today, we're going to be using VS Code Insiders. Raise your hands, who uses VS Code Insiders? Okay, a handful of folks, cool. In case you haven't tried it or aren't aware of it, we have both VS Code Insiders and VS Code Stable. VS Code Insiders, we update basically nightly, so you get really all the latest features and fixes right as the team works on them. I like using VS Code Insiders because I love, especially when I'm using Copilot, to make sure I'm getting all of the latest things with AI and all of the features that the team's working on, because things develop super fast. I also want to make sure that I have the Copilot extension installed. Cool. If I expand this a little bit, I'm going to see that I have both Copilot and Copilot Chat. If I install one, I get the other, so you don't need to worry about, oh, which one do I select and install? I'm sure a lot of folks here, a lot of folks are using Copilot. You already know that at this point, too. A distinction is that Copilot, the one that's just called GitHub Copilot, is going to give you those ghost text completions or suggestions as you're typing. So you're typing something out, and it suggests, hey, here's the next thing maybe you can insert or add to your code. That comes from this extension. GitHub Copilot Chat is going to let you actually have more of those conversations with Copilot. Ask it things about technology in general, ask things specifically about your project, and be able to interact in kind of a more natural language way there. Cool. So now that I've made sure I have my VS Code Insiders, I have Copilot extensions. Also a note, I'm using the Copilot pre-release extensions. In VS Code, folks may have seen that we kind of have a concept of both pre-release and release extensions. Similar to VS Code, where we have both Insiders and Stable, we sometimes, for different extensions, will have pre-release versions. So again, you can get all of the latest features and fixes right as they come out. So I like using those too. Okay, cool. So in my VS Code Insiders here, I already have an app open, and it's actually an app that Damien had shared with me. I don't know too much about it, because he basically just shared it with me, and we figured out, okay, let's use it for this demo. So I think this is a really cool scenario where Copilot can help me get familiar with a new code base and start being productive on it, and adding code to it, learning where things live, testing it, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the chat panel, because I think this sounds like a really good candidate for using Copilot Chat to familiarize myself with this code. You may have noticed up at the top, we have this Copilot icon. This is new in our last VS Code release, and it's going to provide a nice, convenient way for you just to hop into Copilot and some of its actions a little bit more quickly. If I just click on the icon there, it's going to open up the chat panel, and if I open the dropdown, I'm going to see that there's just some quick actions that I can interact with Copilot there, just helping you get into them a little bit more quickly, or even discover some new features that maybe you weren't familiar with before. Okay, so here I'm in the chat panel. I also have it over on the secondary sidebar on the right here. You can drag it wherever you'd like. So in VS Code, you can move views from the left to the right, wherever you find you're most productive and you feel the most comfortable. I really like having that chat panel on the right, because I like having this balance where I can see like my Explorer or my source control on the left. I have this nice editor space in the middle, and then I can go ahead and chat with Copilot on the right while I have those other things open. Cool, so let's go ahead and start working with Copilot. I like this idea of help, what can you do? I want to know a little bit more about what Copilot can help me with here. And I can see that it starts streaming its response here, and it's telling me, okay, I can ask general programming questions or chat with kind of different participants. And so you may have heard the word participants, also kind of similar to the word agents you might have heard in other talks. They're basically specialized experts in different areas. Now this is really cool because it gives you like a more customized, more powerful experience as you're chatting with Copilot. So for instance, I'm gonna see I have a variety of participants built into the experience right when I install VS Code and download Copilot. So I have @Workspace, which is gonna be an expert in the workspace I'm working on. And within that participant, I'm gonna see these different slash commands. Now slash commands are gonna help give Copilot some more specific intent of what I wanna work on. I could totally just type out natural language, my questions or my suggestions to Copilot, but sometimes it's a little bit faster and could even be a little bit more accurate or helpful if I use one of these slash commands to give Copilot a better idea of exactly what I'd like to accomplish in my question. I'm gonna see besides @Workspace, I have a variety of other participants that can help me in my development and in my learning. So I even have one for VS Code that's gonna be an expert in VS Code. I'm sure for a lot of folks, if you're using VS Code, you might have found like, wow, I never knew that like key binding or that extension or that shortcut existed. This is a really cool way to kind of like, if you're like, hey, is this possible? Or what exactly was the command for that? @VS Code can help you with that. And then we're gonna see we have experts in the terminal and Azure, whole bunch of different things. What's cool too as well is that in our last update, we added something for participant detection, so that way you don't always have to remember to specifically type out @ and then the participant you want. You can totally do that, that's valid syntax. If I go ahead and type @, I can see all these different participants I have here, but I don't always have to do that. So if I ask something like, what does my app do? Copilot automatically went and called that @Workspace participant. It detected, hey, like you're generally asking about your application or your workspace. I think that it would be helpful to ask the @Workspace participant. Now what's really cool is we're gonna see the references that that participant and Copilot used. I can expand it and actually click through and explore the files, so I can explore things even more easily there. And I can see that Copilot has really grounded itself in the context of the code that I'm working on. Now, looking at the summary here, so we can learn a little bit more, what does this travel app really mean? So it's a travel application for something called Mona Airways. Sounds cool. And so I can see that it has different pages, it has a travel guide page, an admin page, booking, profile. Seems like it makes sense, sounds good to me. And I'm gonna have another clickable reference here, so I could even get faster into some of the files that Copilot is mentioning or recommending that I check out to learn more. We're also gonna notice that Copilot gave us some follow-ups here. So for instance, it says like, hey, what features need further development? So it tries to give me shortcuts into engaging with it and asking some questions that maybe I would think of before. Also, when I open up a file here, I'm gonna see that it's automatically added as reference to Copilot. So it's saying, hey, since you have this file open, maybe you want me to reference that file in future questions. If I don't want it to use it as context, no worries. I can go ahead and just click this I, and then it would disable the current file as context. Cool. So, all right, so now that we've seen a little bit about how different participants, they exist, they work, I think that it'd be cool to understand what other participants are out there. Like, could I go ahead and install other ones? What are some other ways that I could add more functionality? And so I believe, after talking to one of my teammates, that basically all participants that are published to the marketplace, extension authors can go ahead and tag them with chat participant in the marketplace. But I don't totally remember the syntax for that, so I think this is actually a great opportunity to interact with the VS Code participant. So I'm gonna say, @VS Code, how do I search for extensions with a certain tag? Now we can see that instead of @Workspace, we're specifically interacting with the VS Code participant. And it's going ahead and refining what I asked it, so Copilot can understand a little bit more, and it went ahead and looked at the VS Code docs index, which is cool. Now, in its response here, it's gonna give me actual VS Code commands that I could interact with to accomplish what I wanna do, and it's even gonna give me sometimes quick buttons or links, so that way it's even faster when I go ahead and execute what Copilot recommended for me. Okay, so it says that I can go ahead and pop into the extensions view, so let's go ahead and open that. And then it gives me the syntax if I search for tag and then my tag name there. Okay, cool. So let's see chat. I believe it was chat participant. Okay, looks like that worked here. And what's really cool is that I kind of alluded to this, but I can actually basically expand or extend what Copilot can do by installing and using other participants beyond those that are included out of the box in Copilot. And as an extension author, you can actually add chat participants to your current extension. Or you can go ahead and create a new extension and publish it to the marketplace for any participants that you'd like to create. You can already see that we have a variety here, so you can explore them and try installing them and using them in your Copilot. I think one that's really cool that some of our colleagues have been working on Microsoft and GitHub is the Azure participant. So if I go ahead and type at Azure, I'm gonna see that there's basically different ways that I can interact with, learn about, and deploy to Azure directly from my VS Code editor. If I install GitHub Copilot for Azure from the marketplace, I'm automatically gonna get this extension. And it's really cool because sometimes it's nice if it feels like, hey, I'm already in the flow in VS Code. I'd love then to just work with Azure, manage my Azure resources, deploy to Azure directly from my editor without having to go to the browser, kind of lose that context, get out of the flow there. So we definitely recommend checking this out if you're gonna do anything with Azure in VS Code. Okay, cool. So now that we have familiarized ourselves with our editor, with Copilot, with what it can do, I think I'd love to go ahead and make sure this app is running, kind of check it out and see if Copilot can help us maybe modify its functionality or add something to it. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up the terminal. And what's really cool is that chatting with Copilot isn't only restricted to the chat panel. You can also chat with it in different interfaces or components of VS Code. So for instance, I could basically do an inline chat in my terminal. So if I say Control-I or Command-I, I can now interact with Copilot directly in my terminal, and it's gonna give me kind of specialized answers in the context of the terminal. So I could say, what's the npm command for running my app? And as it thinks about that, there's something else that I'll point out is you're gonna see that when you're working with Copilot chat in places other than the chat panel, you can still use functionality that you see in the chat panel. So for instance, you're still gonna be able to attach different contexts, whether that's if you wanted to use slash commands here, or if you wanted to go ahead and actually attach specific context from other parts of your code base or other parts of your editor. You'll see we also have attach here. So you can use it in the chat panel, inline chat, whatever is most convenient for you. We had seen how at Workspace basically gave Copilot context for our entire code base. If I don't necessarily need to do that, I could give it something more specific, like just the current editor, just the current selection, the current symbol, a specific file or set of files. Whatever I feel like gives Copilot the necessary context it needs to help me. I'll escape out of that. And cool, we can see that Copilot recommended, hey, npm start should work for you. Makes sense. And I could see that I could insert it into the terminal, I could copy the command, or I could even press run, so that way Copilot would insert and run it for me. If I want to do follow-ups, I could also follow up with Copilot here, and I could say, I want to run in dev mode. And then it should be able to pick up on the original thing I asked and kind of qualify that question and say, okay, that would be npm run dev. I do actually already have the app running, just to make sure that it was up and running successfully. I did run npm run dev. And so popping over to the browser here, I can see, okay, here's our Copilot Airways app. And I think Copilot did describe it pretty accurately before when I asked it, what does this app do? What does it look like? I think it does look pretty accurately with the pages it mentioned. So as I'm looking at this app here, and I've familiarized myself with it a little bit more, I think I'd now actually like to use Copilot to start adding things to it, start modifying it. So I think maybe one place to start is there's this top navigation bar, and I can see that there's some links here to things that I think would be high traction places that users want to interact with our app, like booking flights and checking in and getting a travel guide. I think maybe having a place for frequently asked questions or an FAQ would be really useful in the title bar. I don't actually know where the title bar code lives, so let's use Copilot to help me locate where that code lives and then trying to modify it. So I could say, where is the title bar for my app? And as I asked that, you might have noticed that this time, Copilot didn't automatically call at Workspace. But that's no worries, because I can go ahead and chat has history. So if I hit the up arrow, I can just grab that same question. And then I can use this drop-down button, and I can specifically send it to at Workspace. I can specifically call that participant. I also could have typed at Workspace in the chat panel there, whatever works for me. Cool. So looks like Copilot got it a little bit more specifically this time since I gave it that context. And it says, hey, the title bar for your app is implemented in titlebar.tsx. And this is actually a clickable component, and so I can get right there. I don't have to go search for it in my editor. And then it even allows me to specifically click on different components to get even more quickly to where I want to work. I can also see in this file, Damien's left us a comment there, so we can see this is really an app that Damien gave me and has been working on. Cool. So now that we have this open, we see again that Copilot has added this file to my current context. And let's go ahead and ask it to help us add that FAQ entry. So add an FAQ entry to the title bar. And we're going to see that Copilot gives us an explanation of the change that it's suggesting in the logic there, and then it's also going to actually generate code for us. I'll expand the chat panel a little bit there. And if I scroll here, it looks like this change generally makes sense. Like it added FAQ at the top here. It also suggests adding it in the middle. But I don't think I want to just copy and paste this. I totally could if I wanted, or I could just like manually type in my file and make changes. But what's really cool is we have this apply in editor functionality. So if I click on this, Copilot is automatically going to apply the changes it generated or suggested to my file, saving me a bit more time and hopefully applying it pretty accurately. Okay, let's scroll through and see what Copilot suggested here. So I see that it suggested a change here to add an FAQ title, which I think makes sense, seeing as these are the other page titles. And if I scroll down, it looks like that's the only change it's suggested for now. Let's go ahead and try accepting it and see what it looks like when I reload my app. Okay, let's see. Was that enough for it? I don't think it was, because I think we do need to update the FAQ part in the rest of the links that were in that file. So no worries, let's use Copilot to iterate. Okay, so I think that this is a good opportunity to try using inline chat. So I'm going to close up the chat panel for right now to get a little bit more space. And we already saw how we were able to use chat directly in our terminal. We can also use chat inline in our editor in our files. So for instance here, if I wanted to maybe highlight this section of code, I can do Control-I or Command-I, and again, I can ask Copilot things. And so I could say, add an entry for FAQ. And this is a really nice way if you feel like, hey, chatting with Copilot directly in my files keeps me in the zone, makes things a little bit faster, you can totally do that. Okay, so it looks like Copilot suggested some changes here. I think that looks pretty good. I think that looks like the kind of change I would expect. Let's go ahead and accept it. Okay, let's go ahead and save that, and let's pop over. All right, there we go. Now we should have an FAQ entry there. And so we saw there that Copilot, using the chat panel and inline chat together, we're able to kind of iterate with it, discuss with it, and eventually get to a working solution that we had in mind. Super cool. Okay, so now that I've added some changes, I'd like to go ahead and think about, okay, I want to commit them. I want to make sure that they're good. I'd like to start the code review process. Copilot can help us with those steps as well. So I'll pop over to the source control view, and we're going to see here at the top, we have Copilot Code Review. This is also something relatively new that we added, and that's going to basically be able to provide an AI-powered code review of changes that we have not yet committed. And so it's really nice because before you go ahead and start the commit or the PR process, you can just get a little bit more feedback and review from Copilot to help you speed up that process. As I click on that, it's going to analyze the changes that I've introduced here, and they're changes that I actually introduced with Copilot's help. And here we go. Okay, so we can see that it's going to give me different code review comments, and I can choose if I'd like to go ahead and apply them, or if I'd like to discard them and continue exploring. So totally up for me for what I think is the most helpful. You'll also notice that here in the source control commit message bar, I have the sparkle icon. I can generate commit messages with Copilot as well. This is really nice because it just speeds up of, hey, maybe if I have one change I did a while ago, I don't remember it, maybe I just did it, I just don't really want to have to go ahead and type that out. Maybe I have a bunch of changes. No matter the scenario there, Copilot can just help speed up that process and take away that more manual task of having to generate a commit message by hand. And I think the message makes sense there. I did add an FAQ entry to the title bar. One other cool thing to highlight is that we do have kind of those sparkle entry points into Copilot, or you may even see different light bulbs sprinkled throughout the editor. And so you'll kind of notice them as you're working on things, as you're adding new code, adding tests pass, fail, different code errors. Copilot's going to try to help you with those scenarios. As well, like we were mentioning with the Azure participant and wanting to stay completely in your editor to do certain tasks, we found that for the code review process, pull requests, issues, sometimes it feels the most efficient to be able to stay completely in VS Code for those too. So we have a GitHub pull requests and issues extension that you can install and use today. And with that, if I wanted to go ahead and create a new pull request based on the changes I was working on here, you're gonna see a sparkle here as well. And so again, Copilot's gonna help us even generate PR titles and descriptions, speeding up that process a little bit more. All right, awesome. So we got to see a nice overview of, I learned about my app through Copilot, I discovered where different code was, I was able to add a change and review that change. But right now the changes I was working on were pretty much all in that one titlebar.tsx file. For some of the changes I work on in the future, they might cut across multiple different files, or really more generally across my workspace. Like maybe I wanted to actually go add a whole new FAQ page, or maybe I wanted to do some charting or some analysis that would really require context or changes across my project. I think it'd be helpful to use something other than the chat panel I showed. So Damien, can you help us out with that?
I can. What a great idea. Let's do that. So I'll switch over to mine. You'll notice as well that I'm using a Mac, Bridget's using a PC. Obviously, VS Code's across both. We have a consistent experience with VS Code with Copilot as well. So this is the application. I don't have that change that Bridget just made, but one thing I do want to change is on the profile page, this is Copilot Airways, we have our kind of recent points history. It's great, like we can see the changes, we can see how many points we have and things like that, but I think this probably needs some visual way of showing it, so a graph would be really good. But because I'm in this application that I'm relatively unfamiliar with, I want to make sure the graphing and those tools are consistent across the application. So I want to do it the same way that the application currently does it. So I'm going to go through this whole process of this is how I would generally do this work. All right, so let's open the chat panel. And I'm going to ask a question straight away, if I can remember my shortcuts. Is it all 3, 2? You know what? I'm just going to type it. Is there anywhere else in this app where I'm drawing a graph? Because I want to do it the same way that I would do it in the rest of the application. And you can see straight away, workspace. It's used the workspace, so we've got this intent detection. It knows it needs to look across the whole thing. And it says, yeah, we're drawing a graph in the on-time line chart one here. So there's a line chart, let me just collapse this, where we are doing that. And so we want to do it kind of consistently with this application, which is great. Okay. But this is a component in React that gets used across maybe multiple pages. So we're going to end up creating a new component. We're going to need to change that profile page, which is the other thing I need to ask actually, where is this profile page? And we're going to need to probably write some tests because we should do that as well. So we're making changes across multiple files. So first, let's find this profile page. So where in this repo is the profile page? And it's looking again across Workspace. We need to look at the whole thing. And it says, profile page located in page.tsx. So we'll open that. It looks like that's right. App profile page tsx. That's great. We can see there's this points activity table. I don't know what this comment's about. That's weird. And we can see like how it's working roughly. There's a points activity service where it's getting the details and a user profile service where it's getting those details. Okay, so we've kind of got familiar with where we need to go. The next thing we need to do, though, is change all of these files at the same time. We need to create a new component, modify the profile page, write some tests. So I'm going to switch to this tab here, which is Copilot Edits. So this is a relatively new feature. I think we announced it at GitHub Universe a few weeks ago. And Copilot Edits kind of expands that Copilot experience. So we're not just dealing with the one file and making changes to the one file. We're dealing with that whole workspace, the whole project. Anything that needs to change to solve the task that we're doing right now can be done over here. Once again, we have the reference to the current open file, which is great. And I think I am going to need my shortcuts here. So let me just, you know what? I'm just going to do it. All right, so I think this was a line chart that we had before, but an area chart for building up those points is probably better. So can you create an area chart that looks and behaves similarly, it doesn't matter, spelling mistakes are fine, to the, and here Bridget had mentioned that we can attach context. You can do this in line as well. So if you hit hash, it gives you the ability to say, from the code base, from the editor, from a specific file. I can just start typing, on time line chart and hit tab. And now this is a reference to that file. You can see it gets added up here in the working set too. So this is specific context that we're giving Copilot chat to solve this problem for us. Right, looks and behaves similarly to the on-time line chart. It should be shown below the points activity table in the, and again, profile page, but we've already got that in context page. Get the data from the, and again, points activity service. That's where we're getting the rest of the data, so we're going to do that over there. And then what else? Don't forget to write tests. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's see what we get. So it's going to go away to Copilot. It's going to look across the entire repo and the project that I'm working in and figure out what needs to change. So we've given it some suggestions, obviously. The points activity service, it said we probably need to add a new method to get the cumulative points activity for the area chart. We are creating this cumulative points area chart component, brand new file. So it's not just editing files, we're creating files. And then modifying page TSX. And then we've got a test component as well. So we've got 4 separate changes that it's added in this one request. And we can tab across these. So we can see, here's the change that's suggested for page TSX, pull in that area chart, get the details, and then use this cumulative points data. We've got a test file there. We've got, what else? We've got the area chart itself, and then we've got a change to the points activity service. And that looks pretty good. I don't know whether this is going to work first go because it's given me something that I'm not expecting, but that's okay. So I could skip across these files, I could accept them individually, but I can also hit this little button here, which is view all edits. And that lets me view them in one go. So here's our points activity service, our cumulative points area chart file. That looks good. Our change to the page and our test file as well. And if I want to, I can save all of these changes. And I can also accept all of them in one hit over here as well. So accept all edits. All right, let's see how it did. So this was one shot. I typed in some stuff. It made changes to 4 different files. Let's see. There you go, look at that. So we've got this chart that is consistent with the rest of the application because we've referenced a file that has a chart in it already. It's used the same components. It's done it the same way as other stuff. And we get this cumulative points chart just with one hit. So that's pretty cool. All right, let's close all of these. And I want to show off something. You may have noticed this while Bridget and I have been speaking as well, that there is this little drop down over here. So this is new, again, announced I think at GitHub Universe a couple of weeks ago. But we are now giving you model choice. So there is a model picker down here. Right now it's using GPT-4o. But we can also choose to use GPT o1 Mini, o1 Preview, but also Claude Sonnet or Gemini. Now you won't necessarily see all of these when you go and do the drop down as well. We're rolling them out slowly. You'll definitely get these 3. And then Sonnet, I think, is rolling out pretty quickly as well. So you can ask those same questions of different models. So if you have a preference for one of those models, the way it speaks, the way it behaves, you can choose that yourself. So let's try that. I'm going to grab some of the changes that it's made. Let's actually open one of these files. Let's do the points area chart to see what's in there. I'll go to chat, and I'll just say, you can see again, it's referenced that file because it's the one that's open. Can you explain the code in this file? But this time I'm going to use Claude Sonnet, for example. And so this goes out, it uses a different underlying model for Copilot, and it replies a little bit differently to what you'd expect with 4o. Now, they're all going to do a pretty good job and do them quite well, but the models themselves have different, not different capabilities, but different ways of communicating different ways of solving the same problem. So this is really a preference thing. It's up to you if you prefer working with one of them. Things like O1 Mini and O1 Preview as well have this kind of chain of thought built into them as well, so they think a bit more about what tasks need to be done. And so if you have a really complex task, you might prefer to use those. Or Claude as well does some pretty good thinking through the task that you're asking. So just to show you as well, this was Claude. Sorry, this was Claude. If we ask the same question of GPT-4o, for example, actually that's a different one as well, like O1 Mini. It's the same question, but you'll see, a slightly different response. Claude said, this kind of thinking through, let's break it down. Here's the file purpose, here are the key parts, here's the component structure, and so on. 4o Mini said it defines, it's quite right to the point, defines a React functional component, client-side rendering, imports, chart configuration, and so on. So you may prefer one of them for certain tasks, and you can get to learn which ones you like. All right, this is also, by the way, available in Copilot Edits, so you can make the change there as well if you prefer one of those tools to solve those problems across multiple files. All right, let's look a little bit more deeply in here. I want to show you something which is interesting. You might have noticed, if you're paying attention, that the file it gave me for this component uses this launch darkly service. And there is this section of code right here which is using a launch darkly service to get the flag status. Now, launch darkly is one of our partners, and they are a feature flag tool, basically. So you can flag certain components or certain parts of your code to say, we're rolling it out to 10%, 100% of people, we're rolling out to this subset of people. Fantastic tool, but obviously, when you write a React component, when you're asking Copilot for a React component, it's not automatically going to add launch darkly. That's not in the training data across the internet, right? This is a very specific thing that it's done for me in this project. Now, it could have got that from the on-time line chart, because I think we have it in there as well. But in this case, it's actually got it from another new feature we've added called Copilot Instructions. Now, this is something that we've been asked for a lot. For my project, or for myself, my individual preferences, I want to add some things to the Copilot context to say, I want you to behave like this. So you can now, in .github/Copilot instructions, have a markdown file that gets sent along with Copilot each time you make a request. So in this case, I've got, when you create a new reusable React component, add a launch darkly feature flag to it. And I've given an example. So it's used these instructions when I've asked for those changes, which is quite cool. Now, this is great. You can also do things that are much more important, like you might have noticed, by the way, I'm speaking a bit weird because I'm Australian. I have trouble understanding this sometimes because it speaks very American. Can you reply as an Australian, please? So just saving that file, coming back into our chat, and let's just do it again. Can you explain the code in the file? I'm just going to drop back to GPT-4o. Can you explain the code in this file? This is the Copilot instructions. It says, there you go. Oh, okay, yeah, now I get it. Cool. So, but you get the idea, right? So you can do this. This is for across the entire project. So this is checked into the project. So if there are certain ways that you want to work with this application, this will apply for everybody who's working on that project. Did I unplugged the thing? Can you say? We're back. Cool.
We're so excited. The computer's unplugging itself. It's ready to go.
Just jumped off. As the Australian, I think. That was probably some kind of animal. All right, so you can do this in Copilot instructions for the entire project where it's appropriate, but I might have my preferences. So this Australian comment probably is not going to fly with the rest of my team. So rather than do it there, I can also do it in my own settings in VS Code. So if I open those settings and I search for, what is it? Instructions.
Copilot instructions.
Copilot instructions. There you go. Copilot chat code generation use instruction file, so it's going to use that one. But also, where are we? Instructions. So I can have some settings in the settings.json file as well to say, for me specifically, for my user, I want to have everything replying in Australian. Right. This is useful. So one that I actually have in my own settings as well. I'm not going to show you my own settings because I have some other things in there. But one of the things I have in my own settings is when I ask you to explain something, please do it really succinctly. Because I like these huge walls of text. I just want the answer to the question, please. And it works really well. So I have those custom instructions for me as well. So you can do this for yourself or across the entire project where it's appropriate as well. Awesome. All right, so we've kind of done a bit of a tour. We've got, what, 10 minutes left?
You have 10 minutes left. We have some quick resources. We can also pop on the slide there. So if you want to check out our docs, you want to give us feedback, feature requests, issues, super welcome that, super helpful for us. And we also have a ton of really awesome YouTube videos about VS Code in general and also a ton about Copilot. So super recommend checking those out. We've also included ways you can contact Damien and I. But now that we've gotten through that, I think we had a creative idea. I think it was your idea, the creative one.
Yeah, this is like the last session in this room for the entire conference and like the second last session slot for the day. And so we thought we'd just completely risk it. You've all seen this application, right? What should we add to it? We're going to do this live. Like this is not, we don't have seeded questions, but does anybody have any suggestions for things that we should do to this application right now? And we'll show you how we would probably use Copilot in the real world. Yes?
The page looks quite dark. Maybe you can add a light mode.
Oh,
the page looks dark. Let's add a light mode was the suggestion. I think that's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea. I think it's great. This is like a massive image, which is going to make it slightly difficult. But all right, well, let's do that. Do you want me to do it or show you? Yep.
Go for it.
It was my idea. I should be in the deep end. All right, so let's do edit with Copilot. We'll do this flash and say, all right. So this is what I would normally do, right? I would probably say, all right, well, to do that, I need to kind of work out where the theme is, where the CSS and things are. So how is this application themed? And see what it gives me. So the other thing which I didn't mention before, we're still in Australian. I'm not going to.
But this is good because you said that
that
helped you.
I'm not going to remove it. You can also see though that we've got like as its references. It's not using references to the rest of the application, but we can see it's used the code generation instructions from my settings, but also that instructions file. So you can see that is references those sources. So you might find it in a theme.cs or something. Okay, that's not really what I wanted. Let's see.
Maybe we could send it to @Workspace, the same question?
That's a great suggestion. I'm glad there's two of us up here. Oh, can I do that here? Oh, no, I'm in
type
chat.
@Workspace?
Oh, you know why?
Yeah, because
Sorry, I was in edits.
We're in edits.
Where in this application is the theme? I don't know. Let's just try that again. Okay, so intent detection worked. I was in the wrong window. I was in edits, asking to edit across files. So we're in the chat window. It's used a bunch of references. Theme configuration for this application is located in the Tailwind config file. Okay, cool. Yeah, there you go. All right, theme, extend colors. All right, I don't really understand much of this, but there we go. We've got that file open.
It says border and colors. That seems like theming.
It seems like
I trust it.
Oh, it looks like it's using Tailwind. Okay, interesting.
Cool.
Can you, let's jump back to edits. We'll do a new one. Can you add a light mode for the application? Oops. And you know what, just for fun, I'm going to use Claude. I don't know why. Just,
it's Friday. It's feeling fun and different.
Yeah. G'day. Yeah. Thanks, bloke. All right. So update the Tailwind config to include light and dark color values. We'll add the light color mode while preserving the existing theme structure. Okay, thank you. So you can see it's kind of trying to work out where we're going. I suspect it's probably going to just modify this one file. And probably not do too much because Tailwind actually has like, oh no, it seems to be doing stuff. We've got the dark and a light. Oh, it's done a bunch of stuff. All right.
Copilot thinks it did a great job.
Yeah, all right, except let's just see what happens. By the way, I'm just going to point out as well, I'm not super confident in this because this is very demo code and I kind of know how it's themed and I don't think it uses this very well at all, very much at all. But anyway, let's try it. All right, we'll refresh. Let's go to like a book flight page. Oh, what's going on? It's not responding. Oh, you don't want to see all that. Book flight, check-in, okay. Let's just open the terminal and see what's going on. You know what? I'm just going to do this. npm run dev. I knew this was a bad idea. All right, let's run it. I was using Babel to do some cross-compilation and stuff like that. Ready. Let's get out of full screen mode. Oh, the browser's like gone. All right. Try it again. Live coding.
And what's cool too is like, if folks saw the theater session I might have done, or folks have just tried debugging with Copilot, and when you have errors pop up, what I found to be really helpful is that you can basically just copy and paste that directly into the chat panel, for instance, and say, fix this. And sometimes it can really help, so you don't have to like parse through complex errors.
Yeah, it looks like we don't have errors, but we also
I know,
don't have much of a light mode. Whoa, this is a dark mode. So I might even say like, how would I switch to?
It'll tell you in VS Code how to switch to light mode,
Oh, all right.
which could be helpful.
Yeah, that's okay. Dark mode false. Oh, hey, dark mode false. Sure. All right. It doesn't like that. False is not assignable to thing. Cool. What else could I try? That? Delete the code that's doing the wrong thing. Yeah. All right. Well, look, we've got some of the way there. Yeah, ship it. That's fine. To make it light mode. I was saying as well, because I know this is demo code, we are using Tailwind, and it is doing all that sort of stuff. So in a project that's like real code, it would probably do the right thing. We've just dumped a whole lot of CSS, and we're overriding everything that's in Tailwind, so that's why it's probably not going to do a great job. Anyway, we've got this global CSS, so I'm kind of forcing it here to say, just modify the CSS, please. But we should be able to see, you know, modify them. Struth, that'll do it. Great. Oh, there's a lot of CSS in there. That's good. Let's watch it. Like, the other thing is this streams, so we can kind of see it.
Maybe while that's streaming, if anyone had any questions, we have a couple of minutes. If anyone wanted to come up to the mic and share any questions, we probably have time for one or two. I think we might need, do we have still a mic in the middle, I think? Yes, if I can like see through the stage lights. I think you could just come up, or I guess if folks want to yell it out, I can just repeat it after. Sure, go ahead.
How do I convince my InfoSec team that it's okay to use a public LLM to expose my code?
So the question was, I'll paraphrase. Yeah. How do you convince your InfoSec to use a public LLM for your code, to expose the code? Yeah, so the first thing I would say as well is, if your code is on GitHub, it is on our servers anyway. So that's one thing. The other one is, so the way that Copilot works is when it gathers the context that we require on the client side. It packages it all up in a way that Copilot's going to understand. It sends it up to the Copilot servers. We run through a bunch of filters and things to make sure that we can do caching and things like that, or caching, sorry. And then we run it through the large language models on our side. We run through a bunch of other filters to get the right responses, make sure we're not returning things that are like security vulnerabilities and stuff like that. Depending on your policies, we can do things like block any code that matches something that's in public repositories as well, so we don't give you any of that back. We send a response, and then everything that we sent to the server is gone. It's trashed. It's removed from memory. We don't save it on disk. It's completely gone. So we don't store any of that information up on the server. So that sometimes goes a long way with the InfoSec teams to say, well, we're not collecting those requests or the responses we give you. We don't save them at all, so we don't use them to retrain models or anything like that. If that is not enough, we do have a, so GitHub itself can be deployed, so GitHub Enterprise Server, but that will still use Copilot from github.com. However, we have a newer offering which we call Proxima, which is kind of on like data residency, basically. So you can think about it a little bit like your own GitHub.com, and that means that Copilot will be running from that region. GitHub itself will be running from that region, so at least it's not going overseas to another server as well. I mean, those 2 things or 3 things maybe can go some way, but yeah, I'd reach out to us if they have specific concerns as well and see if we can resolve those.
I think we can be around after. I don't want us to go over time, but thank you all so much for sticking with us on a Friday. We hope you enjoyed this session.